שלום חברות, חברים, השעה אצלי כבר דקה אחרי 9, אז רציתי לחכות טיפה כי עלינו קצת מאוחר, אבל אנחנו נתחיל בתקווה שאתם תמשיכו להצטרף אלינו ותגיעו בזמן. אז קודם כל, ברוכות הבאים וברוכים הבאים לעוד מפגש וובינר של סיימס אברוד. אני מאמינה שרוב מי ששומע אותנו כאן עכשיו כבר מכיר אותנו, כבר היה במפגשים קודמים, אבל אם יש במקרה מישהו או מישהי שלא, אז אני מספרת לכם שאנחנו משדרים את המפגשי וובינר האלה כחלק מפעילות הרחבה שאנחנו מפעילים בארגון סיימס אברוד, שמיועדת לחיבור בין מדענים ישראלים שנמצאים בחו"ל ובישראל, ונעשית בתמיכה של המרכז לקליטה במדע והאגף לעידוד יזמות עסקית שבמשרד העלייה והקליטה. אז אם אתם עוד לא מכירים אותנו, עוד לא נרשמתם לנו באתר, זו הזדמנות מצוינת עבורכם לקרוא עוד על הפעילות שאנחנו עושים ברחבי העולם, בקמפוסים מובילים, פעילות מאוד מאוד חשובה שנעשית עם מתנדבות ומתנדבים נהדרות ונהדרים. כל המידע הזה נמצא באתר, אני אשים קישור מתחת לוידאו לייב הזה, ותוכלו לקרוא ככה או תוך כדי השידור או אחר כך, וגם להירשם ולהצטרף אלינו. חוץ מזה, אני גם אספר לכם שאנחנו מקליטים את המפגש הזה הערב, ואתם מאוד מוזמנים לצפות בו שוב, בעצם ההקלטה תעלה מיד כשנסגור את השידור בעוד כשעה וקצת, וגם אחר כך תוכלו לראות את זה אם תרצו לשמוע משהו שהדובר המיוחד שלנו היום מספר היום, ולעבור על זה שוב פעם. אז מי הדובר שלנו היום? אז אני מאמינה שגם את זה אתם כבר יודעים כי נרשמתם והזמנתם כרטיסים, אבל אני אספר לכם שוב פעם, שהיום אנחנו מאוד מאוד שמחים לארח כאן את דוקטור מיכאל קנובסקי. אני אספר עליו קצת והוא יכול לספר על עצמו בהמשך, ואני מאמינה גם שתשמעו יותר על פועלו. אז דוקטור קנובסקי סיים דוקטורט בביולוגיה מולקולרית בבית החולים סיני באוניברסיטת ניו יורק, ואחר כך המשיך לתפקידי מחקר וניהול באקדמיה ובמגזר הפרטי. מעל כעשור עוסק דוקטור קנובסקי בעריכה וכתיבה מדעית. חוץ מזה הוא גם מעביר קורסים וסדנאות בנושא באוניברסיטאות, כמו במכון ויצמן באוניברסיטה העברית ועוד, וגם במרכזים רפואיים כמו בית חולים שיבה, בלינסון ועוד. אז היום אני מקווה שגם את זה ראיתם. ההרצאה באמת הולכת להיות בכתיבה ועריכה מדעית, ולכן היא תועבר באנגלית, מה שאני מאמינה שאמור להיות לכולכם דבר שאתם כבר רגילים להתעסק בו, אבל רק ככה גילוי נאות. וזהו, בלי יותר מדי לדבר, אני אעביר את המקל לדוקטור קנובסקי. אתה יכול להתחיל את המצגת, ואני רק אגיד שנייה אחת לפני שאני מסיימת, ששאלות למי שלא יודע, לא יודעת, מעבירים במספר דרכים. הדרך המומלצת ביותר, כיוון שאנחנו נמצאים כרגע בווידאו לייב, הוא בעצם פוסט בפייסבוק, אתם יכולים להגיב מהמשתמש שלכם מתחת לוידאו. זו הדרך הכי נכונה והכי מומלצת. אם יש בעיה, אז בבקשה לשלוח לנו בהודעה פרטית לסיימס אברוד, לעמוד שלנו, או אם אתם נמצאים באחת מקבוצות הוואטסאפ, אפשר גם לכתוב שם, אני מסתכלת על הכל תוך כדי השידור ומעבירה בסוף את השאלות. אז תודה רבה שהצטרפתם אלינו, וכן, עכשיו דוקטור קנובסקי, אתה יכול באמת להתחיל. תודה.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to be giving this seminar in English, even though my Hebrew is fine, but everything about scientific writing today is in English, so there's no reason not to give it in English. I'm going to go slightly quickly because I have an hour to give what I normally give in a semester-long course. So, of course, I won't be talking about everything, but I will try to condense it as much as I can. And that's why I called it scientific writing in a nutshell, or in Hebrew, as you can see, al-qtseh mazleg. That, by the way, is just also an interesting thing when you talk about writing. One of the things I tell people who are not native speakers in English, do not use idioms, do not use figures of speech, because there are lots of problems when you try to translate from one thing to another thing. Just a very trivial example. If I want to say in English, I'm covering everything, I say from head to toe. In Hebrew, though, it's mikaf regel vad rosh. So I can't really translate it from toe to head. It will sound very strange. Okay, let's go into into scientific writing itself. I'm going to give 3 parts to this lecture. Part number 1 is writing as a form of communication. Regardless of whether you're going to be writing a scientific article or writing anything, it's a way that we communicate. And because we're trying to communicate, We have to improve our ways of communicating in order for the person to understand what we want to say. The second part, which is pretty much the main part of the lecture, or the lines part of the lecture, is going to be about tips. I don't want to say rules, but sort of how to write different parts of the research paper. I'm sure you've all written research papers, and if you haven't, they'll be wonderful. And if you have, it's still also good to just to go and to refresh your memory about the different parts of the research paper. And the last few minutes, I'm going to be talking about some practical tips for writing. As I was introduced, as you know, I am a molecular biologist by trade. However, for the last over a decade, I've been doing mostly scientific editing and also some writing. I've done a little bit of research, but it's mostly editing, and therefore I come from not only from the academia point of view, but I come from the practical point of view where people send me articles and they want to make sure that these articles will be judged on their science and not on the English. Okay, so let's first talk about writing as a form of communication. By the way, I also have a quirky sense of humor, and you'll see that also in my slides over here. Okay, so when we talk about communicating, we want to clearly communicate. We want to make sure that our ideas are understood by the other people. Now, this I took from, as you can see over here, from the University of Wisconsin System Undergraduate Teaching Improvement Council. I want you to take a half a minute or so, read this paragraph, and tell me if you understand what is going on over here. Okay, well, it should be total silence. I'm just, jabber a little bit. I understand that people can't, this is not really an interactive type of format. So one of the things that we see over here is that this whole paragraph is 2 sentences, right? We have one sentence that goes up to here, the word instruction, then the other sentence over here. Long sentences are problematic. There are problems with having long sentences. We'll talk about long and short sentences a little later on. But one of the problems we have with long sentences is that we see a sentence as sort of a chunk of information that we put in our brains that we have to understand. And when we have a long sentence, until we process till the end of the sentence, we really forgot what we was talking about in the beginning of the sentence. So sometimes we have to reread things. When you have to reread things, that's just not good. I'm sure that you guys understand every word that is written here in this paragraph. The problem is that just the way these sentences are structured makes communication over here very, very not clear, and this is definitely not a way to improve undergraduate teaching. Another example in science, right? This is from an article in Science. Here is they quote something from the Lancet, right? And here, as you can see, this in quotation marks over here, it's a mess. Anybody who is trying to understand what's going on over here most probably will not be able to understand what's going on over here. And that's due not only because that's one long sentence, but also because the words that are used over here, even though you might understand most of the words, maybe you won't understand gestation. Gestation is another fancy word for taste. There are a lot of sort of words that are used that you don't have to use them. You can use simpler words. We'll talk about that. And basically what this whole paragraph means is what I wrote over here on the bottom, right? Experiments are described which demonstrate that a normal person can taste sugar in water in quantities not strong enough to interfere with his sense of smell or take away his appetite. And that is it. It's much easier, it's much shorter, and we'll talk about all these things in the in the continuation over here. Okay. So what is scientific writing? What scientific writing is, like any other type of writing, it's a way in which we take our ideas, we worked hard, in whatever lab we're working in, or not in a lab, or whatever the case may be, we came up with something that we want to share with the world, and we want to communicate it from one individual to the other individual, and we want to do it in the clearest fashion possibly. And that is really what our task is. Our number one job is to make the reader's task as easy as possible. And that is, hard writing makes easy reading. Easy writing makes very hard reading. And therefore, the more time that you take in order to make sure that your ideas are understood and clearly understood, the easier it is on the reader to understand these things, and they'll be very appreciative. And this I took from, this is a book on scientific writing, right? It does not matter how pleased an author might be to have converted all the right data into sentences and paragraphs. It matters only whether a large majority of the reading audience accurately perceives what the author had in mind. And that is really what we want to say over here. And writing is a wonderful tool. What writing forces us, it forces us to take our thoughts, which might be jumbled, which might not be organized, and put them in a very organized way. And that is why we continue to do it in writing. And writing is right now, unless some machine is going to be invented that can read thoughts and things of that nature, right now writing is the way that we transmit our information from one individual to, I guess, to the whole world. And as this person writes, writing is thinking. To write well is to think clearly, and that's why it is so hard. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. And it's really all about communication, right? And as this Nobel laureate said, I feel disloyal but doubtlessly truthful in saying that most scientists do not know how to write. The only way to learn how to write is, above all, to read, to study good models, and to practice. Well, okay, he was back in the 60s. Back in the 60s, there really, or in the 50s and 60s, there really wasn't much in the way of scientific writing courses. Today, there's a lot more understanding that not everybody is a born writer. Actually, 99.99% of us are not born writers. And really, scientific writing is very important in our fields. It doesn't matter if we're in academia, if we're in anything else. Writing is key, is one of the basic ways to communicate our ideas. And this was a sort of a refute of this from this guy, Tim Radford, who was the editor of The Guardian. And he writes, there are several canards about scientists, but one is more pernicious simply because so many scientists themselves repeat it. Scientists are not good communicators. Just from this sentence alone, I have a little problem with this sentence. The words that I underlined over here, canards and pernicious. If I want to talk to the general audience, I don't know how many of you know what a canard is, and I don't know how many of you know what pernicious is. I'm sure some of you do know, but these are not common English words. And this is one of the problems that we have when we try to sound very sure of ourselves, very scientific. We try to use many, many words that are very narrowly used by other people, and that hinders understanding. I'll get to that later on as well. And this is a quote, whether Albert Einstein said it or not, I don't know, but it is a true quote nevertheless. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. My father, whenever I came back from school, he asked me what I'd learned, and I would say, well, I understood it, but I can't really explain it. Or he said, no, that means you don't understand it. If you can't explain it simply, that means it's not sitting well in your head. You're not fully. I'm sure you understand what you're trying to say, but if it's hard for you to communicate it to others, whether in writing or orally, there is something wrong over there. All right. One of the other major problems that we have is that we tend to use many, many extra words to say what we want to say, and that is cluttering. And when you get to things like long sentences, you get to sentences that go on, paragraphs that go on, and you're saying to yourself, what's the person actually trying to say? And you look at a 50-word paragraph or sentence, you say, I can cut it down to about 20 words. That is clutter. That's a problem that sort of causes lots of problems as far as understanding what's going on. Here is an example in scientific writing. I mean, again, take a look at this. I know we have a problem again that this is not interactive, but if I take this paragraph, which is actually all of one sentence over here, there was a strong correlation between the sexual orientation of those sharing the strain with 71% of the 197 strain. You can see it's a difficult sentence to understand. And this is published data. As you can see over here, it's a Lancet. That doesn't mean that everything that's published is well written, is well understood. That really is not the case. Even in good publications like the Lancet, that does not mean that it's well written. Another example of that is over here. What I'd like you to do is just take a look at this paragraph over here, read it once as it's written, and then take out the parentheses and read it again as just one simple sentence, and you'll see how much better it is understood when you take out the parentheses over here. Okay, now, right, the sentence without the parentheses is, we adopt this broad scale approach to determine that relationships occur both at the level of the population and also across individuals. That's it. It's a very simple sentence. It's understood. The problem when we put in parentheses, what it does is it stops our train of thought. We read the parentheses. We then have to go back to remembering what we read before the parentheses. It's not that we can't use parentheses. Use them cautiously. Use them sparingly. Use them only when really needed. Okay. This is a truism. I've heard this song from graduate students in every discipline and from faculty members, junior and senior at universities across the country. The message: you have to write the same way as others in your field. You must use multisyllabic words, complex phrasing, and sentences that go on for days, because that's how you show you're smart. If you're too clear, if your sentences are too simple, your peers won't take you seriously. And she goes on and she tears this apart, and it's so true. People appreciate when you write something that is understood, that they can read it one time and understand it. They really appreciate it. They do not like large sentences. They're not like long sentences. They're not like multisyllabic words. These do not impress people. There was a study. This was just a fun thing that I found. This was from the Journal of Zoology. This is just a title of a paper. Does human pedestrian behavior influence risk assessment in a successful mammal urban adapter? Now, no one, when seeing this, I will talk about titles soon, no one, when they read this title, will have any idea what this paper is about. Because what this paper is actually about is this. Do squirrels run away when you're approaching them or looking at them? That's what this paper is about, which is, you know, I'm not going to discuss whether this is a good thing to research or not, but you cannot understand that at all from the title, and you understand now why they wrote the title in such a way, because I guess they were ashamed of just writing it in this fashion over here. All right, now using these, what happens? This was actually there was a study done about this, which they took an essay and they made 3 different versions of this essay. One, a simple one, the regular type, the one they made more complex sentences and more complex sentence structures, and one they made even more complex. And they wanted to ask the people what they think about these 3 essays. And what they found was actually the simpler it was, which was basically the original, had more of an acceptance rate. They liked it more than the moderately complex or the highly complex. So you're not only causing, you're not only making yourself sound more obtuse or more that people can't understand you, you're harming your chances of actually achieving what you want to achieve, and that is either publishing your paper or having people use that paper as far as references are concerned. All right. Moving on, what are the things that make a good scientific writer? Okay, clearly you have to have something to say. You have to have some logical, clear thinking in order to make sure that you're going to be writing it in a logical order, and we'll talk about that soon as well. A few simple learnable rules that we'll talk about. Lots of practice, more practice, and yes, and you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to make more mistakes, and you're going to make more mistakes. Just try not to repeat those mistakes, right? So you can learn how to write more clearly, more effectively. This is not something that's not an inborn talent. This is something that's definitely learnable and doable. And one of the things that you have to make sure is when you practice something, you practice it correctly. Or as somebody writes it over here, right? Practice does not make perfect, only perfect practice makes perfect. So please don't try to, go repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again. It's going to get ingrained in you, and it's going to be very difficult for you to drop those mistakes. You can really improve your writing. And how can you improve your writing? 1 is listening to lectures like these. 2 is when you read an article, pay attention. Is this article simple to read? Is it simple to understand? If it is, why is it simple to understand? What did this writer do in order to make this writing simple? If it's not, if it's difficult, what's happening over here as well? Pay attention. Let go of these academic habits of writing very long sentences, complex sentence structures, all these things, complex wording. You don't need that. You really want to make it as simple as possible for the reader to understand. It's always good also, of course, to talk with other colleagues, to think about it yourself, to get it into that logical order. One of the problems that we have as researchers is that we are in our research subject 24/7. We understand everything perfectly. We have no problem going from step A to step C because step B is trivial. Everyone understands it. However, the readers, when they're seeing this article, they're not in your subject all the time. They're interested in for whatever reason they want to read this article, or if it's the reviewers, these reviewers are usually also not totally exactly in that subject that you're talking about. And when you skip from A to C, they're there scratching their head and saying, what's happening over here? And all these other problems. That is one of the problems that we have. English is also a wonderful language. You know, there are a lot of words that can be used. Try to get a thesaurus habit in the sense of using a lot of different words that are specific for specific things, and use those words correctly. And one last thing, which is really important, I have a slide a little later on talking about that. If it's important, have somebody else look at it. You know exactly what you wanted to say. So if you go over it, of course, you're going to go over it once, twice, three times. Give it to somebody else to take a look at it. And if that other person understands it, preferably a person who is not exactly in your field, maybe somebody who's a little tangential to your field, give that to that person. If that person can understand what's going on, wonderful. If not, the problem is not with that person's understanding because you gave it to that person, so you trust that person. The problem 99.999% of the time is with the writer. All right. You also want to make sure that when you are addressing an audience, you know which audience you're addressing. That makes a big difference. If I'm going to be sending an article to a general journal, such as Nature, such as Science, such as these types of journals, or if I'm going to a very specific journal. When I'm going to a very specific journal, I could assume certain knowledge. When I'm going to a more broader journal, I have to make sure that people who are reading this article can get up to speed. Also, stop waiting for inspiration. Inspiration comes when you work hard. It doesn't come from just waiting for it. And everybody has difficulties writing. Trust me, even people who are native English speakers do not like writing. It's not something that we get up and we say, wow, okay, I'm gonna now bang out an article. That usually does not happen. And revisions. Revise, 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 revise. You're going to revise until you hate it. You can have versions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, as many as needed until you get it right. And everybody does this. Everybody. Right? Basically what I said. And I'll give you some examples of these. Cut out clutter. Cutting out clutter is basically cutting out words that are not needed. And we'll give examples of those things as well. And of course, find somebody who might be able to help you, like a good editor, or if you have friends that they're good. Again, another pair of eyeballs for sure. And if that's not enough, get somebody who's professional. Okay. Basically, these are the 3 steps in writing. Before you start writing, what am I trying to say? When you finish writing, have I said it? And then after that, of course, is can I make it simpler? Can I make it easier? Can I make it easier to understand? And that is basically what we want to do over here. And just like in real estate, the 3 rules for real estate is location, location, location. The 3 rules for clear writing is getting to the point, getting to the point, getting to the point. You don't want to meander. You don't want to write these long, long paragraphs. And basically, it doesn't say much over there. And that is what we talk about in clear communication. We want to make sure that when we write, whatever we're writing, paragraph, a sentence is one thought, a paragraph is about one idea. You go to the other paragraph, there's connections between the paragraphs or connections between the parts. There is some logical order over there. It's all one big package. We'll talk about this when we get to the parts. what I want to stress in the paper, that my main idea will be stressed in a few parts, and it will be stressed in the title, will be stressed in the abstract, will be stressed at the end of the introduction, will be stressed also in the discussion part. So all this basically makes sort of one clear package. Here's an example of basically when I talk about shortening your sentences. Take a look at this sentence over here. The expected prevalence of mental retardation based on the assumption of a normal distribution of intelligence in the population is stated to be theoretically about 2.5%. As you can see, you might, it's not that this sentence is not understood. The sentence is understood. It's long. There are a lot of words over here that are put in that we really don't need, such as based on the assumption of in the population stated to be. Let's see how can we shorten this sentence, right? We could take this sentence and we could write the expected prevalence of mental retardation if intelligence is normally distributed is theoretically about 2.5%. It's about half the size of the original sentence. I did not lose any information over here. I don't want to lose information. When I'm shortening sentences, I want to make sure that the information that the sentence has is kept in the shortened version as well. And we're always limited with the amount of words that we can use, right? If a paper has, most journals have limitations on the article itself. So most of them also have a limitation on the abstract. Some of them have limitations on the different parts of the article. So if I can say more with fewer words, I'm able to get more information out there to the public, and I'm able also to do it in a clear fashion. Okay. George Orwell, the famous author, had a few rules of writing, which is true for novels, but it's also true with scientific writing as well. Never use a long word where a short one will do, meaning if I can use a simple word that's understood by everybody and I want to use a more complex word because it sounds, more dazzling, it's not. Use a simple word. Of course, it doesn't mean that I can only use one syllable words. You can use, English is a very rich language, but if I'm able to use simpler words to make my ideas understood, do so. Cutting out words that are not needed, definitely. Passive and active voice. This is also important. We'll talk about this. Most of the articles, most of the journals today like active voice. We'll talk about the difference between active and passive is basically where we have our verb and where we have the person who is doing that action, right? Active voice is dogs like bones, right? Dogs is the noun over here, and they like bones. All right, we'll talk about that in a second when we get to active and passive voice. Active voice is preferable in most parts. I know a lot of people use passive voice because passive voice sounds more academic, sounds more scientific. It's not, the focus is not on me, the person who did it, but on the action itself. However, we'll see it deadens the article. It causes, it makes it longer, and it's harder to read. Okay, jargon, of course, scientific jargon will be used. We have to use it, but in some cases, we sometimes tend to overuse it, and that makes it harder for people to understand. All right, as far as sentence length, there is no magic formula up to what, how long can a sentence be. Rule of thumb, get to about 20 words or even less than 20 words, you're skating on thinner ice over there. However, if need be, you can use longer sentences. The basic rule of thumb that I use is that if a person can understand the sentence when they read it the first time, the sentence is okay. If they can't, it doesn't matter if the sentence is 21 words or the sentence is 17 words, there's a problem over there with the sentence and it has to be fixed. Okay, right. So normally shorter is better, of course, up to a point. You don't want to have a scientific article that sounds like see Jim run in the sun, right? You want to have it a little bit higher level. But if it does, you don't have to use long sentences. This is, as you can see, where it's taken from over here. It's from 2002. It doesn't matter. It's true today as well. The reason that that scientists from the US and UK, their acceptance rate is higher than these other places, not because there's that much better of a scientist. it's because of their English. It's just because of their English. I'll tell you a short story. I had a client here in Israel with a very non-English sounding name who sent in an article. He gave me the article to edit. He sent it in. He got it back in a day or so, saying, please send it to a scientific editor for editing. He sends it back to me. I look at it. I find a few minor mistakes that I didn't see the first time. I told him, we'll just leave it as is, and we'll just write at the end of the article in the acknowledgments. So I'd like to thank Dr. Knosky for his scientific editing. We did that. His article was accepted. What happened? There is a bias. There is a bias among editors. We're all people. When I see an article coming from a foreign country with a foreign name, I say to myself, it's probably not written well. You know what? I have so many articles that I don't. I'll just send this back, and I'll be able to clear my desk a little bit. So we as foreigners, or we are in foreign countries, or Israelis, make sure you have to doubly make sure that your English is okay. All right. As I said, I have a quirky sense of humor. This is basically the first part. This is clearly an Israeli mistake over here. All right. One thing, again, this is a very important rule to remember. Good writing is like a pencil. The more you sharpen the point, the shorter it tends to get. And this is from the Elements of Style. If you don't know this book was written over 100 years ago, and it's still true today. You can get this book online. And basically what he says over here, omit unnecessary words. Vigorous writing is concise. A sentence should contain no unnecessary words. A paragraph, no unnecessary sentences, for the same reason that a drawing should have no unnecessary lines, and a machine, no unnecessary parts. That doesn't mean that it has to be a bare minimum, but it means that the words should have meaning. So when I have words like this, due to the fact that, I can say because, and it means the same thing. Or in order to, I could take out 99% of the time, I could take out the words in order, and it will not change anything in the sentence, and it will be great. So there are lists and lists of these type of things on the internet. There's just one of them that I found. As you can see, you can shorten things without losing any information whatsoever, and that also makes your writing clear. Okay, when I talked about active versus passive, right? So we have over here subject, verb, object. This is our active verb. The subject did something to the object. In this case, wild penguins is the subject. Attacked, verb. My sister, who is the object over here. Passive voice, my sister was attacked by wild penguins. As you can see, first of all, it's longer. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. Over here we have 7 words. So we already made this sentence a little bit longer. And of course, if it says only one sentence, if we write a whole bunch of these passive voice sentences, it will make it even longer than that. There are some cases, there are some places in a research paper which we will use passive voice, and I'll be talking about that. But most of the time, use active voice. It's good in marketing, it's good in every place, and it's good also in science as well. All right. Yeah, I like this slide. If anybody knows about active and passive, you'll find it a little funny. All right. Okay. The reason that we like active voice is that we like action, right? We like action in movies, we like action in books, we like action. We are sort of built for action. When you have an active voice, it sort of sings over there. It goes quicker. The sentences are shorter. Things follow one after the other, and that's why we like active versus better than passive. It doesn't mean that I can't write any sentence in passive. Of course, I can write a sentence or two in passive, but try to write more in active than in passive. All right, here are some more rules, and I'll be talking about these rules in a second. Okay, so for instance, common words are better than rare words. I have these 2 words over here. Let's take this example. I have quantitate and quantify. Both of them are excellent words in English. However, I see over here just from the Google hits, right? Quantify has 12 million hits, and quantitate has less than 1 million hits. So if I want to choose a word, which one of those words to use, I'll use quantify, because more people will be able to understand quantify. They'll read quantitate. Wait a second, what's quantitate? It will just cause them a pause for a few seconds. It doesn't mean, it's not worth it necessarily. If I'm using the word quantify too many times and I want to sort of mix things up a little bit, fine, use the word quantitate. But if it's my first choice, I'll go with quantify. All right. Specific words are better than general words. I want to be as specific as I can in my scientific writing. That makes my writing clear. So I don't want to write changed. If the levels changed, what did the levels do over here? They increased, they decreased. I want to be as specific as I can. Okay. The other thing is over here. Oops, sorry. Okay. There is the. I'm sorry, the slide got messed up a little bit. It's my fault over here. English comes from two major roots. You have the Latin root, and you have the Germanic root, and you have words in both in Latin and in Germanic that you can use. Usually, the Latin words are more verbose. They're longer words. For instance, if I take for instance to here you can see show or demonstrate, right? Show would be more of the Anglo-Saxon root. Demonstrate is more of the Latin root. Again, both words are fine. Both words are great. And this definitely, when you're writing grants, and some grants, they not only do they have a word count, some grants have even a character count. So if I can say the same thing in less characters, I gained a little bit. All right. This is pretty much all I'm going to talk to you about as far as writing in general. Let's now get into the structure of the article. Boy, time is going fast. All right, so this is basically what we have in our article, right? Here's a problem. It's an interesting problem. It's an unsolved problem. Here's my idea. My idea works, and here's my idea in comparison to others. How was it used to be conveyed? The old method, the writing, here's a paper from 1869. It's basically a long story. The person basically writes this article, and it's a story. Within that, you'll get whatever information you have. The problem is it's very difficult for me to find the information that I want quickly in these types of articles. That's why we came up with whoever came up with it came up with the structure, the IMRAD structure. IMRAD is introduction, materials, results, discussion, and abstract, or whatever it is, whatever the case may be. I'm able to go to whatever section I want to go to and get the information that is relevant, right? And IMRAD is basically how things are used today in research articles, pretty much exclusively. All right, so let's go and let's first talk about a title. All right, when we write a title, many times it's not going to be the first thing that we're going to write. It could be the last thing that we're going to write, but it's a very important part of the paper. As this person wrote, right? It's the most important piece of real estate is your title. You get this wrong and you lose your hard-earned readers in 2 to 3 seconds flat. Right? Basically, I'm looking for an article. I go and I do a search. I get a whole list of articles over here. The first thing that I see are the titles. If the title looks interesting, I will click on it and I will see. I'll read the abstract. Maybe it helps me. Maybe it won't help me. But if the title is not interesting, if it doesn't give me the information that I want to see over there, I will not even click on it. So I lost my readers by not having a good title. What are good titles? I want to have a descriptive title. I want to have the title that describes the major finding of my paper. I can have certain keywords in my title. I don't have to have all the keywords. One of the things I also want to make sure is that I don't use too much punctuation, and especially question marks. I don't want to use question marks in my title because the reader is the one with the questions. You, the paper, should be the one supplying the answers. So when I see a question mark in the title, it doesn't interest me. I'm looking for answers. So basically question marks are out, of course, plus, minus, things with genes and things of that, all of those natures, fine. Colons are used a lot as well. Okay, but the less punctuation marks, the easier it is, again, for the reader to understand. So I want my title to be informative. I want it to be concise. It doesn't mean that it has to be very short, but it has to be concise, no extra words over there. Of course, it needs to be original. I can't have 2 papers with the same title, and it doesn't need to be funny. Don't try not to make it, as somebody wrote, you want to be known as the trapeze artist, the person who has those skills. You don't want to be known as the class clown, in this case over here. So I don't want to have a very long title. Of course, many journals limit me on the size of my title, but I don't want to have it too short, because too short means that I'm shooting myself in the foot. I'm leaving out information that the person who just sees my title might be interested in understanding what's going on in this paper. So I want to provide that information. Rule of thumb, plus minus 16 words usually are enough for a title. There are a lot of exceptions to this, but this is a plus minus a good rule of thumb. Here's an example, right? If I'm talking about statins and cholesterol, if I have and my title is statins and cholesterol, it doesn't give me much in the way of information. Here I have a little bit, okay? I'm talking about the effects, but what effect? On what type of serum cholesterol? Here, okay, so what effect on reduction of serum cholesterol with statin therapy? And here is, just giving enough information that when I see this title, okay, statin therapy reduces serum cholesterol in patients with cardiovascular disease, now I know what this title is, what this article is about. And if I'm interested in this article, I will go and I will click on it. You also want to make sure that you can deliver on what the title says. So if I use the word novel, make sure that it is novel, because if it's not novel, you'll be called on that. Here you have two times the word novel is used. Identification of tissue enriched novel transcript and novel exons in mice. Again, make sure that both things are novel. Here, this person went he went saying gestational diabetes from A to Z. All right, when you use a title like that from A to Z, you better make sure that it is from A to Z over there. All right, good titles don't have to be cute, don't have to be sexy, don't have to be don't have to be funny. They're just the title just tells me what this paper is about. It gives me that information. It says, okay, if I'm interested in this thing, use this. As you can see over here, let's say in the second one over here, regulatory natural autoantibodies to apoptotic cells, pallbearers and protectors. Okay, so the person uses I don't want to say being funny, but it uses some sort of metaphor over here. You don't need that. You can just basically say what you want to say, and when the more information that you can put in the title that will tell me what the main result of this paper is, what the main subject of the paper is. That's what I like. That's what I want to see in a title. All right. Here are some examples of almost good titles. All right. What do I mean by almost good titles? Let's take a look at this one. Impact of obstructive sleep apnea on cognitive and motor functions in Parkinson's disease. Wonderful. However, tell me what this impact is. I don't want to know. Yes, there is an impact. What is the impact? I can put it in my title. I can add a few extra words over here, and it will tell me what the impact is. And again, it will just be able to attract that many more viewers. The same thing over here, levodopa versus dopamine agonist after subthalamic stimulation in Parkinson's disease. Okay, what is better? I could say levodopa is better than dopamine in this, whatever the case may be. Give me a little bit more information in the title. Okay, that's enough about titles. I'm skipping abstracts now for a second. I'm going to be going back to it at the end. An abstract is basically a mini paper. So when we go to the end of the paper, we'll go back to abstracts. Okay, so let's talk about it a little bit in the introduction. I found this on some blog, and I think that this is really good over here. Here's a bit of meta advice in this point. One major way I've learned how to improve introductions is by thinking hard about negative referee reports. In my experience, when a paper gets a referee report that I disagree with, the explanation is often that the introduction needed to be clearer about something. I am introducing this paper to a person who is not 100% in my field. And sometimes the referees are not only not 100%, they're not even 50% in my field. These are just the people that the journal was able to get to referee my paper. And that is, as this person writes over here, the difference between an average introduction and a good one is often the difference between your paper being understood or not by some fairly random referee who has sufficient subject level expertise, but is not closely clued into your particular perspective. So in the introduction, you really want to introduce the paper to the people who are not exactly in your field over here. How much do you have to use on that introduction? That is totally depending on the journal that you're sending it to, and a lot of other things. What is in a good introduction? I want to have, first of all, some background information, enough information that the person who's reading this, should be able to understand what's going on in this article. What is missing? What's known? Sort of now, okay, up to now this is known. However, this is not known. How am I going to investigate that unknown thing? What is the major result? And of course, I also could put in a conclusion. The last two things you will see less in medical journals. but even in medical journals, you will have most of these things. So when we talk about an introduction, we have to start off with the first sentence. The first sentence, like any other novel, you open up, you read a book, the first sentence isn't good, you're sort of hesitant about the rest of the novel as well. The same thing with a paper, especially when you're talking about a reviewer. The reviewer sees a problematic first sentence, you're ready, you're not 3 strikes out, but you're pretty close to it in that sense. So you want to have a first sentence that gives, it's a general sentence, but it gives a little extra information. It gives a little more oomph in that sense. So let's take over here. Leukemia in infants is rare, but generates tremendous interest due to its aggressive clinical presentation in a uniquely vulnerable host, its poor response to current therapies, and its fascinating biology. Okay, so that is, I'm getting you interested in this subject over here of leukemia in infants. I don't want to make it long. I don't want to make it irrelevant. I want to make sure that, again, that the sentence does have, it's the general sentence, it has some extra information, and it's not something like this, right? This is a real first sentence in an article. You read this sentence and you're saying, if that's the first sentence of the article, the rest of the article is going to be a real problem to read. So you want to make sure that you're, or you have a sentence like this, right? Colon cancer is one of the major human malignancies. Wonderful. Okay, it's a blank sentence. It doesn't give me any extra information. Give me something. Say colon cancer is one of the major human malignancies. It's the 3rd leading cancer death, cause of death in North America, or something to that effect. Okay, same thing over here. It's just a very sort of blah type of sentence. I'm going to give you some short introductions over here. Of course, again, time is not on our side over here. So take a look over here. We have our first sentence. The title over here is Dairy Foods and Risk of Stroke. So we have our first sentence, dairy consumption has been inversely associated with blood pressure in some observational studies, and hypertension is a potent risk factor for stroke. Okay, so I'm giving some added information over here. I then go more deeply into what I want to talk about over here. Okay, and I'm giving you here enough information that you should be sufficiently knowledgeable in what's going on and understanding the article. This is not a review article. I don't have to give you everything. It's not your thesis. It is an article. After a certain point in time, I say, okay, you have enough information. What is not known? However, prospective studies on milk and total dairy intake in relation to stroke incidence or mortality have produced inconsistent results, and most previous studies had a small number of cases, and therefore we did A, B, and C in order to overcome these problems, and that's where it stops over here in this medical journal. However, in scientific journals, we usually also give the main result that we found and some sort of conclusion in our introduction. Introductions usually look, at least the first part of the introduction, we're going from a very general sentence to more specific, to more specific, to more specific. It looks like an inverse cone in that sense, and that's how we want to build our introduction. That it should have enough information that that the reader should understand. Always a good rule of thumb, if you want to write and you have in mind a certain journal, go take a look at that journal, see how long their introductions are. Plus, minus, of course, there's going to be a variance over there, but you'll get some sort of idea. All right, here is, I'm going to go quickly over here. Here's a scientific article. Next generation sequencing identifies rare variants associated with Noonan syndrome. So in my introduction, I'm first going to talk about what Noonan syndrome is. And here, yes, it's a long sentence, but it's an understood. It's actually, even with the parentheses, it's an understood long sentence over here. So telling me exactly what Noonan syndrome is about. I then go on and I talk about more about the about what Noonan syndrome is and how it's caused molecularly. Right? We have our RAS pathway over here. We have the RASopathies. Okay, and I go into more and more detail about it. I then go in more detail, narrowing down about what's known, what's not known. All right, and I talk about together these genes account for 80% of the clinically diagnosed Noonan syndrome patients. All right, and of course, what is not known? What's not known is the other roughly 20% of the genes. This is what we did. I'm not going into it in detail over here. Into detail, I will go into it in materials and methods. And here is our major finding. Here we report the identification of additional candidate genes that when mutated are likely to cause Noonan syndrome. That is basically the end of that introduction. If I have more than one topic, I have to basically introduce one topic, then I have to introduce the other topic, combine the two, and then talk about, again, combining the two, what's known, what's not known, then talking about how we went about doing what we did, and then the major result. Okay. That's basically it for introductions. Moving on to materials and methods. Materials and methods. Why do we have materials and methods in the paper? There are two major reasons. We want to either two things. One, that there should be enough information there that another person who is sufficiently knowledgeable in the field will be able to repeat that experiment, and that the reviewer, when reading the paper, is saying, okay, that's what this person did, then yes, the results that this person got are legitimate, because when you do these type of experiments, these are the type of results that you expect to get. So, and that's what we want to do. I want to describe how I got to what I got, how I did the research, and what I want to do is I want to describe the materials. I want to describe how they were prepared, explain how the measurements were done, which statistical tests were performed. I want to include enough information that a person who is knowledgeable in the field can repeat it. I don't have to put in a protocol. I just have to put in enough information that somebody in the field should be able to reproduce my experiments. I'm going to be using, of course, past tense, because all the things in the materials and methods are things that I have done already. And it's also going to be using passive tense, because I don't care who did the experiments, whether I did it, whether the lab tech did it, it doesn't matter as long as the experiments were done. And another thing is we usually find the materials and methods are subheadings. It makes it easier for the reader to find the information that they want to find. If there are any, I don't have to describe. I could always write this method was done just as done in such and such place. However, if there are any modifications done to equipment, to protocol, all those things should be mentioned. Of course, if there are also any human subjects done in the experiment or animal subjects, I need to have in the materials, usually in the materials and methods, the informed consent or the or showing that I got the permission from the ethics committee. All right, another thing in materials and methods, I don't start sentences with numbers. That's not only in materials and methods, that's in writing in general. I don't start with a numeral, meaning I don't like, we'll say 2 times 10 to the 6 cells were used. I'm going to write it in a way that I started with a numeral. I can write, instead of 22, I can write TWENTY TWO, but I can't write 22. All right. And as far as reagents, only reagents that make a difference, such as antibodies, software, I then have to specify where I got those reagents from. If I'm talking about NaCl, NaCl is NaCl is NaCl, doesn't matter which company I got it from, it's the same thing. Here are some rules for numbers in general, not only in materials and methods, but in general. If it's a number that's larger than 10, I can write it as a number. If it's a fraction or a power, I write it as a number. If it's less than 10 without a unit of measure, such as 5 mice, I will write it as a word, not as a numeral. All right. Here, for instance, take a look over here. 10 millimolar glycine. Glycine is glycine. I don't know to say where I got it from. I don't have here ml buffer. On the other hand, ml buffer is not a common buffer, so I have to go into a little bit more detail about the buffer itself. And when I talk about protease inhibitors, lots of companies make different types of protease inhibitors, so I have to be more specific about where I got this from. You can see over here 5 micrograms. The person did not want to start the sentence with a number, so they wrote it out 5 micrograms, and that's okay. And here, as you can see, GSC pull-downs were performed as described previously. Wonderful. That's all I have to write. I have to give you just a how to get there. And by the way, I don't have to go back to the original paper. All I have to do is give you a sort of a hook and how to get to where you have to get to. Also, in materials methods, it's good if I got something from other labs and I want to acknowledge their kind gift. One of the places I can do it is in the materials and methods section, and it's always a good thing to do is to acknowledge other people's kindness, especially if you want them to help you again. All right, this is something that is becoming more and more common. Publishers are they'll run your article through a huge database, and they will see here your sentences are taken from this place and that place and the other place. Therefore, it's never worth copying and pasting sentences to your article. Always change them to do something to it, because the more that these software is going to be used, even self-plagiarism, your previous articles are going to be counted against you. They don't like it, they don't want it, and you're dependent on them. So you have to make sure that you can just change the sentence as much as you can. So I can tell you. All right, moving on to results. By the way, results, I talk about this in 3 separate classes, 3 weeks. Here I'm going to be talking about it in 5 minutes. What I'm going to be doing I'm taking my data, my raw data, I'm digesting it, I'm condensing it, I'm doing whatever analysis I'm going to be doing to the data. I'm putting it in a way that is easy for the reader to understand what's going on. That usually means a graph or a table or a photograph. And I'm not discussing the results over here. I'm not discussing what I found. I'm just presenting them. And I'm writing them in a way that is understood, that it doesn't matter how I did the experiments. It doesn't matter if I did experiment A, 1, 2, and 3. I can talk about 2 and then talk about 1 and then talk about 3 if I think that the story is a better story if I do it that way. All right. And of course, the results are the meat and potatoes of the paper. If you don't have good results, if you don't have results, you don't have the paper. So make sure that your results will be able to, as it says there, if the conclusions are accurately supported by the data, the paper will be rejected. So that's, of course, is very important as well. So I'm stating my results. I'm not interpreting them. The interpretation will be in a second in the discussion part. I'm going to be probably going a little bit over time. I hope that's okay. And it's going to be organized around usually figures and tables. It's going to be in past tense because I did these results already. And it's usually I'm going to do it in active voice, right? We observed that's active. It wasn't, and we observed whatever we observed over here. Okay. So I'm summarizing them. I'm giving also some sort of context. I'm giving a reason, why did I do this experiment? It's not because I got up one morning and I said, this is a good experiment to do today. There's a reason why I did this. And I'm going to put in the text. I'm talking about there are 2 parts of the results. You have the text part of the results, and then you have the figure itself and what's going in the figure legend. Each one of them is different, and each one of them has a purpose. So in the text part itself, I give some sort of justification for the experiment. Sometimes it could be a long justification. Sometimes it's sort of, especially if it's the 2nd or 3rd or 4th result, it's sort of, okay, I did these results, I got this, so it's understood that I'm going to be doing this experiment. So my reason for doing this experiment is going to be very short. Sometimes it's going to be just 1 word or 2 words or a sentence, or sometimes it's not even going to be there. But I have to give some sort of reason why I did this experiment, and then a little bit about the experiment itself. I really, like we said in the beginning, I'll say on my leg in a nutshell. And then I say, go take a look at this figure. And what I want you to see in this figure is this and this and this. And I'm not going to explain, I'm not giving you the whole figure. I don't want to explain the whole figure. But when you look at this figure, this is sort of the take-home message from that figure. That's what I have in my results section. Okay, what goes in the legend itself? Take a look. Okay, so we have over here. We then analyze, right? That's the justification for the experiment. And we found that, and this is what we did over here. And this is what we found. We found that MIR-127 was downregulated in 9 out of 10 breast cancer tissues, and conversely, BCL6 expression was upregulated in figure 6. Now we go to figure 6, and what do we have over here? We have the figure itself. Here we have a bar graph. Everything over here, as the figure has to be sort of a standalone type of thing. If I walk into the room now, as a biologist, I see this on the wall, I should be able to understand what was going on in the experiment. I don't know what the significance of this experiment is, what the person wanted to show by this, but I should be able to understand. I should have enough information in this experiment I have the graph itself, I have the axis, the y-axis, the x-axis, the colors being explained over here, everything else in the figure legend. I have over here I have the figure legends title. I have a little bit sort of a materials and methods, what I did over here, enough that you should be able to understand what the experiment was going on over here. Then I have also the statistics and any abbreviation or things like that, like I have over here N and T. And again, it should be a standalone. It should be enough. I should have enough information over here in the figure that I should be able to understand what's going on. Okay, this is basically what I talked about over here. Now, what I don't want to have in the results section, I'm deciding how am I going to present these results in a figure, in a photograph, in a table. I don't do it in different ways. I do it in one way, and I decide what's the best way. Normally, the best way is always with a figure or a photograph. We like photographs, we like figures, we less like verbiage, we less like tables. But if I have a lot of information, if I have a lot of text or things like that, sometimes I'm going to have to use a table. And that's legitimate, that's okay, tables are fine. However, if I'm trying to show trends or trying to show something that's happening over here, it's a lot harder to see it in a table than it is in a graph. In a table, I have the title on top of the table. I have the table itself, the columns and the rows explained. Anything that needs additional explanation is in the under the table. It goes in the footnotes over there, and that's basically how tables are done. All right. Again, I'm doing everything over here sort of really short. We get to the discussion. Discussion is one of the more complicated parts of the paper. There's a lot to say about the discussion. If an introduction looked like an inverted funnel, the results are listed in a sequence that I decided is the best way to tell this story. The discussion section is something else totally. This is from as you can see over here, from the British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. It doesn't matter. What he's saying over here is basically the discussion section is a difficult section to write. It's one of the harder sections in the paper to write, and therefore a lot of papers have very poor discussions. And what I want to have in the discussion, I have the results. What do they mean? How does this answer the question that I asked in the beginning? How does this compare with other papers? So basically, in a nutshell, right, these two questions, so what, who cares? These are the answers. These are the questions that I want to answer. So what I have over here is that what I want to do is as follows. I want to make sure that the discussion connects to the rest of the paper. I want to, if I have in the title, if I'm emphasizing something in the title, I'm emphasizing something in the abstract, I want it also emphasized in the discussion itself. So what am I having in the discussion itself? I have, first of all, I start usually with the major finding, or at least, if not with the major finding, I start with the question that I asked in the beginning, and then I go to the major finding. For instance, over here, right, in the present study of 21 primary samples of acute leukemias, we demonstrated that AN9 has anti-proliferative and cytotoxic effects on leukemia cells. That's our main finding in this paper, and that's how my discussion begins. After that, why is this my main? Why is this? What's the significance here, right? This finding suggests to us that growth of mammalian cells, where these findings indicate or demonstrate, you'll see people use lots of different words. The one word that did not use over here is prove. Don't use the word prove. If you use the word prove, the reviewer is going to say, you proved something, I'll prove to you that you didn't prove it. So just stay away from the word prove. All right. After that, I'm taking my findings and I'm comparing and contrasting it to other studies. We're 99.9% of the time we have other studies that have researched similar things. So if it's similar to other studies, wonderful. Just point them out. Write them, because A, it shows that you're knowledgeable about what's happening in your field, and you're not trying to you're not trying to say this thing is novel. There are other people who got similar information as well. If it's not similar, if other people got different results, your results should be legitimate results. You did this thing in triplicate. You did it a few times. This is what you got. It could be that your experimental model is a little different, and that could be the reason why you got contradicting results. But it's always better that you explain it, that you bring those other studies and you say, okay, those studies used I don't know what, used a cohort of patients. This in this cohort, we used they used Oriental people, we used the African Americans, whatever the case may be, and therefore our results differ, and that's legitimate and that's fine. right? These completely just so here just some I have some examples of that, and again, it's better that you point it out than the reviewers say, well, you know, how come you didn't mention this study, which doesn't show exactly what you wanted to show, and the subtext over there is that you're trying to hide something, right? If there is an alternative explanation to what you want to show, it's important for you to point it out, and then to point out why your explanation, why you think your explanation is a better explanation than the alternative explanation. All right, here's an example. Again, I'm not going to go and read it, but they're saying basically that yes, there is another possibility. However, our possibility is a better one. Okay. Studies limitations. Every study has limitations. You're limited by the amount of time you have, by the amount of money you have, your subjects, your cell lines, whatever the case may be. We all have limitations, and that's okay. You don't want to have it too limited in the sense that it's useless. But all studies have limitations, and that's why we take an aggregate amount of studies and we use it and we get our information that way. You know, so you know, here, for instance, this author listed 5 limitations that he had. This paper was still published, and he writes, you know, even with all these limitations, we have these certain strengths that our study has, which warrants its publication. Right? If I have unexpected results, wonderful. Unexpected results could lead to wonderful discoveries. Don't try to hide them, explain them. Here's again an example of that. After that, I can make suggestions for further research. This paper is not the be-all and end-all. I want to continue it, even though I might not continue it at all. It doesn't matter. I can write further research is warranted in this thing. And then at the end, I basically give some sort of take-home message, a conclusion, and that's basically how the discussion looks. So the discussion, unlike the introduction, goes from the very narrow one point and then goes and spreads to more and more general. Okay, this is basically a summary of what we just talked about. This was a very interesting case where somebody published an article and it had to be retracted because the postdoc who wrote the paper put in a sentence in one of the earlier versions to his PI, and that sentence stayed in the article even after it was published. And then only when somebody read it, he said, maybe you might want to pull this sentence out. And this is also the importance of other people reading this paper. And even when other people read the paper, it's still mistakes happen. And take a look at the sentence that was left in over here. Anyway, they interviewed this guy Gabor, and this guy Gabor said, of course, he wasn't too crazy that they called it a crappy paper, but a lot of people were interested in this paper just because they called it a crappy paper. Anyway, this paper was pulled. They had to republish it without this sentence. Now, I do apologize. I didn't get to abstracts. Basically, in an abstract, I want to have. I'm going to say it by heart over here. I forgot to put in a few slides for the abstract. The abstract is a little mini paper. I'm going to have 1 or 2 sentences as an introduction. I'm going to have the next sentence saying what's missing. I'm going to have the next sentence talking about what is the way that I went about to do the experiments, my result or results, and some sort of conclusion. That's basically what I want to have in the abstract. Abstracts are, of course, limited in the amount of words that I have. Some abstracts very much limit me. There are some papers that limit them to about 150 words, but that's really extreme to one end. We have abstracts that can go up to 450, 500 words. So you have a lot more room over there. You have to decide what you want to stress over there. If you're able to have more in the way of stressing, more results and more conclusions, wonderful. But basically, again, the structure of an abstract is a short introduction, a short reason for why I did this study, then how I went about doing this study, my major results or results, and conclusions. And that's basically what I have for the abstract. Finally, just a few words of, okay, we talked about abstracts, we talked about words, how I can just simply lower my word count without really doing much. Okay, so this is one thing that is very easy to do. Word sees this. When I say N space equals space 3, Word sees this as 3 words. If I just remove the spaces, I see it as only, Word sees it as 1 word. So if I cut down as much as I could, but I'm still a few words short of what I need to be, this is one easy way of reducing my word count. Hedging words, we try not to be, right, we write over here, our findings suggest that thyroid eye disease, though rare after the age of 80, may have a different course. I don't need to use many hedging words. All I need to use is 1 hedging word. So I can say our findings suggest that thyroid eye disease, though rare at the age of 80, has a different course and features compared to younger patients. So I cut out that word. The word that itself, a lot of times I think sequentially, and I use this word that a few times, right? We found that cells that overexpress protein A grew slower than wild type cells. If I rearrange a sentence, I can cut out the word that, and I'm good. Conjunctions, meaning I take 2 shorter sentences and I make it into somewhat of a longer sentence. And that's okay. Like if I have over here, patients treated with drug X had an overall survival rate of 6 months, and patients treated with drug Y had an overall survival of 12 months. That's a wonderful sentence. However, if I have to cut out words, I'll just make this into 2 sentences, cut out the word and I save myself a word over here. A lot of times I start out sentences with there are or there is, and I don't have to write it. I can rearrange a sentence. No, instead of there are no previous studies, I can just write no studies have, and I cut out a few words just right then and there. A lot of times, again, I think sequentially, and therefore I have a sentence like this. This is a real sentence that I got. An increase in the levels of misfolded proteins triggers activation of a regulator, of transcription, of HSP, of. It's first of all, it's an ugly sentence. B, there are a lot of extra words over there. I can cut it down, just rearrange the sentence, and I cut down words. English, I can't, if it's in singular, I have to have an A, an, or a the before it. I can't just say ball is round. I have to say a ball is round, the ball is round. But I can say balls are round. I can say, I could say a car is red, the car is red, cars are red. So therefore, if I change it into plural, like I have over here, instead of the RNA secondary structure is highly dynamic, RNA secondary structures are highly dynamic, and they're both fine, and I just saved myself a word. All right, those are just some of the ways that I cut down on words. There are a lot of other ways. However, my time is not only finished, it's way over finished, and I'm pretty much, that's it for tonight. If you have any questions, you have my email from the beginning, knuffsky@gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. If there are questions that were asked during the seminar, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, Michael, we do have one question, so I'll just ask you right away. So this comes from Yasha, and he's asking, in your experience, what is more readable on a paragraph level, giving away the idea up front and then to elaborate, or building up to the main idea gradually?
They're both fine. You should write them out, see which one looks better. There's no, you'll have novels that use this way. You have novels that, right in the beginning of the novel, they have what happened at the end, and then they sort of start from the beginning, and you have novels that do that at the end, and both those novels are bestsellers. So there's not, writing is an individual. Everyone has their own style. As long as it's clear, as long as it's understood, both ways are okay.
All right, thanks. So is it fine if I share your email with the people who came to this webinar tonight?
Feel free to do so.
All right, so that will be a great help. Thank you very much for your time. באמת תודה רבה. העברת הרבה מאוד חומר בזמן קצר, אז אני בטוחה שאנשים...
אני ממש מתנצל.
אין לך מה להתנצל, לא. בשביל זה באמת גם חברים יש את ההקלטה, אז אם אתם באמת רוצים ככה לחזור לשמוע שוב חלקים מסוימים, אולי לא הייתם איתנו מההתחלה, אולי היה איזה חלק שיותר חשוב בשבילכם, אז אתם מאוד מוזמנים, ממש עוד 2 דקות שנסיים את השידור, ההקלטה תעלה באופן אוטומטי לעמוד שלנו. מיכאל, יש עוד מסר, משהו שאתה רוצה להגיד לפני שאנחנו נסיים את השידור היום?
Again, writing is hard for everybody. I don't like writing either. I can just tell you that even Beethoven, when you look at his scores, he had to write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, and he was Beethoven. So there's no shame in rewriting and doing more and more revisions. I know you hate it. We all do. It's something that we have to go through, but still writing is the best way to deliver information that we have. That's pretty much it. That's all I can say. That's the nature of the beast.
Thank you very much once again. Thank you for your time. תודה רבה גם לכל מי שהצטרף אלינו הערב, ומקווים שככה קיבלתי מזה באמת אינפורמציה חשובה שתעזור לכם בהמשך הקריירה. וזהו, אנחנו נשלח לכם גם שוב לכל מי שהיה בזה, שתספרו לנו חוויית הצפייה שלכם, ואני גם אעביר את המייל של מיכאל אם יהיה לכם שאלות נוספות. אז תודה רבה מיכאל.
בשמחה.
ושיהיה המשך לילה טוב לכולם.
לילה טוב, חודש טוב.